Hi, HR Nation. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Today, we've got a special guest. I think it's the second, third, fourth time. We're losing count at this point, Dan. We're joined by Dan Schwabel, New York Times bestselling author, speaker, entrepreneur, host of the 5 Questions podcast, and managing partner of Workplace Intelligence. Welcome back. How are you?
Anytime I'm like, has another year passed? I just talk to you and I'm refreshed that, we haven't spoken in a year. It must have been a year past.
Yeah. How you been?
I'm doing great. I mean, I just, work with Oracle to release, our annual survey. It's the biggest one of my career. The last one won 3 awards and was covered in, way over 1,000 media outlets. And this is my 60th study I've led since 9 years ago. So it's really fun that I'm still interested in all of this and still trying to explore. And what I always tell my peers is I feel like I'm an archaeologist trying to discover the next dinosaur bone, but in a workplace capacity, trying to discover new trends and connect the dots. I also think like, in your childhood, you're like, using Legos to build something or like you're trying to put a piece, a puzzle together with all these different pieces on the floor. Like I think of it with the research perspective and doing what you do as well is like talking to people, really trying to figure out what the future is, but using the voices and the data to build that story and narrative to instruct people of what to do right now to prepare for the future.
Mm-hmm. I think now more than ever, right? Given the last 18 months, obviously there's been a lot of tragedy, but out of that has become a lot of opportunity.
Yeah. And
as well.
I think you nailed the key point. It's, now it's not like a year plan, a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. Now it's, okay, what are we doing today? Like, what do our employees want from us today? And like what we discovered in the survey, we interviewed 14,600 HR leaders, C-suite executives, managers, employees in 13 countries, is really this discovery of, okay, we've done this for a few years. Where are, let's tackle new issues, new areas. And one of the big areas that, you've probably focused on as well this year is the Great Resignation. In America, at least you had, 15 million people quit their jobs. You had about 11 million unfilled jobs. Unemployment rate is pretty low. So compare and contrast that with last year, people were just happy to hang on to their jobs. So if you think about, in terms of what we found in this study of, 75% of people feeling stuck personally and professionally, last year they were stuck in their job, just hoping that they would retain the job. Now they feel stuck because they can't figure out what to do. There's so many different opportunities because of the decentralization of work and the fact that you could apply for a job in another country that you couldn't have in the past.
Do you feel like the power dynamic between the employee and employer has switched?
Oh, completely. Yeah. It's 2 different universes. Last year it was, not getting a pay increase, potentially getting a pay cut, potentially getting furloughed, laid off completely, collected unemployment. Like it was a really tough time for people, especially in certain sectors. It's like the hotel and restaurant industries. And now you see all these signs outside of your local restaurant or any retail chain say like begging people to work there, increasing minimum wages. I think the big thing that really stood out as kind of like a pivotal point that showed how different things are this year compared to last year is Walmart saying we're going to make 2/3 of our hourly workers full-time employees. They're not doing that for fun. They're doing that because competitively, in order to retain talent, that's something that they think is going to be really effective. And so I always look at what are the big employers doing? And that gives me kind of a scope and lens into economic changes.
Talking of big employers, I just read an article about Google, about the fact they're saying if you don't want to work in the office, you're going to take a 25% pay cut. What do you think about that?
There's also a lot of blowback against that. We'll see what the best strategy is. The workplace is very dispersed. People have their own preferences. A lot of people over the past year already relocated and don't want to relocate again. And so because there's more opportunities competitively, Google's not the only show in town. And therefore, with other companies, maybe more modern companies as well, offering a lot of perks and benefits, that could be an option, is to look for another job and pivot, especially now when the economy is so great. But again, any company that comes out with, hey, we're doing hybrid, hey, we're going to, pay you based on zip code, all these different strategies and thoughts, like this could change very quickly. I mean, look at what's happening right now. A lot of companies were saying, hybrid or office work in September. It's October and they're already
Yeah.
thinking about January. So it goes back to what you were saying before. It's even though in this study, we talk about people feeling stuck in their career and their life and turning to technology to figure out what they should do next in their career. It's also the same thing with employers that in the beginning of COVID were scrambling, trying to figure out what the remote work policy was. Now they're trying to figure out what their return to work strategy is, right? And
Hmm.
I think that this is just a preview. This is, we're going to constantly have to adapt. Decisions are going to be made and changed. It's going to be much more of a fluid operation now, whereas years ago it was more of, okay, this is what we're going to be doing for the next 5 years. Now it's, what are we doing this week?
Just for everyone listening who haven't seen the study, what was the main theme? Because you cover so much, but what is the main theme of this year's study?
At the highest level, throughout the years, Workplace Intelligence, my company, and Oracle have partnered to investigate the relationship between robots, machines, AI, and humans in the workplace. And when I say in the workplace, I also mean in life, right? Because
Wherever work is done now, because there's no longer a location you go to,
yeah,
right?
exactly,
Just,
Chris.
yeah.
Exactly. It's like work and life are so blended. We work where we live and we live where we work, and everything is like very intertwined. Even if you work in an office location, you go home from the office, you're at your house, and you might be answering business email. So it's everything is very fluid. It's kind of like all over the place. And we have in the past had some great topics and angles, like when it comes to decision making, who would you rather trust? A robot or a human? Last year was about mental health, and this year is about career development. And the reason why it makes sense for this year, of course, because of the great resignation, people feeling stuck, people still feeling, mental illness and mental health struggles and burnout coming out of this COVID pandemic that, is still going on, right? There's no, the new normalcy is happening every week. So I think that this is a special study because not only of the size and breadth of it, but we've watched these trends grow over the years, and now we're seeing, okay, this is definitely going to impact career development because what we found is that this relationship between humans and machines slash robots slash AI is going to be a great relationship if we know what each should be doing to support one another.
Hmm.
And that's another thing that we've investigated every year. And like, even with the mental health survey, it's like, it's all about like using the technology to get answers to your questions very quick, 24/7, whereas you might not have access to a human. But there's also this role of a human, right? Like, these studies are not saying, hey, we're going to automate every single job in the world, right? That you might read in like the World Economic Forum, right? We're more of saying, hey, this is a partnership here, and let's figure out what the roles and responsibilities and how to best capitalize with humans and machines in this new age of work that's constantly developing. So if you think about what humans can do that robots can't when it comes to one's career development and what we should turn to humans for, like a career counselor, developer, manager, mentor, is having them offer advice based on their own personal experience, an experience that cannot be replicated by a machine. Having them be able to recommend roles that fit your personality, right? The soft skills, who you are as a person, whereas it's harder for a machine to like understand those personality traits and differences. And then the other thing is identifying strengths and weaknesses. And again, like maybe potentially robots can do better at that in the future, but for right now, it's more apparent, like as you get to know someone from a work relationship standpoint, what are they good at and kind of what they need to improve on. So you can more assess that. Whereas machines can help answer those questions. Like I was saying, they can help connect a person to the right courses, to the right potential jobs that they might want to take.
Hmm.
So from an internal mobility standpoint, I think of all this technology becoming extremely useful because we also have this massive skills gap. Again, I said that the 11 million jobs unfilled in America alone, and this is the widest I've ever seen, even in a good economy. And therefore, one of the big struggles within corporations, and I'm sure you've covered this, is we have all these open positions, we have this talent, but they don't have the right skills. So you have companies like AT&T and Verizon and Amazon, and all these companies saying we're going to invest hundreds of millions or billions in upskilling and retraining our workforce so that as we get into new businesses, now that we need to hire for new skills and new positions, they're going to be ready. So we don't have to go out and hire all this external talent, which is more expensive, more time consuming, and you want to reward the people and create good morale within your company. So I think that it comes down to having the technology help people within the company navigate certain skills and courses so that they can rise within the company instead of leave.
It's definitely, it's empowering employees, right, to take charge of their career, their learning. I'm seeing some incredible work that companies are doing around building their internal talent marketplaces as well. And a lot of companies, you know, they've have employees that have been with them for many, many years who have a new set of skills, but they don't have that on their updated CV, right? So there's so much talent and skills that exist inside of companies that companies don't even know about. And how do they then tap into those skills inside their business? As well.
I remember when I was working at a big technology company early in my career before I went solo, you know, we had like an internal social network, and part of the profile was you want to list your skills outside of work, right? Because there's certain things that you might be good at that you don't exercise at work that could play a role in supporting another teammate at work.
Yeah.
And so I do think we are still and will continue to be in this world of big data in terms of machine learning, in terms of showing you what jobs you might be qualified for or what skills you'll need and courses you need to take to fulfill different positions within the company or another company. But I also think it's this abundance of data. It's like the more data we pool, the more accurate these recommendations by robots will get. And we're also already the biggest finding in the survey is kind of similar to previous years where 82% of people would rather believe a robot can support their career over humans, right? And we saw this with mental health was, you know, I believe around 2/3.
Yeah, that shocked me, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
When I saw in the research where it said they would rather go to a robot, an AI, or to talk about their mental health than their own manager. I remember reading the study being like, wow. Well, it kind of
I actually sent it to a lot of my therapist friends, and they're like, immediately like, no, I'm going to lose my job. But then they really started to understand, wait, even we are starting to rely more on this technology because therapists, you know, have therapists too, and everyone needs help and needs to get answers to their question. And, you know, with AI chat technology that's able to take all of these answers to common questions around mental health and how to handle, you know, burnout, you know, I think it's helpful to them too, much like it would be helpful to a worker who is struggling and it's 4 a.m. They're not going to call their therapist or manager, but they can, you know, type something in a chat bot and get the answer to a question that could help them through the night. So again, it's not one or the other. It's everything is now. And you probably can understand and relate to this with all your interviews too. And all the CEOs I've been talking to, it's what's the purpose behind what we're doing? What's the purpose behind using that office space? What's the purpose behind using this technology to solve a problem, mental health or career development related problem? So I think a lot of what we're going to head into now, and the word is, what's your intention? What's your purpose? These words I keep hearing and hearing and hearing by all people around the world. So it's kind of guiding my thought and philosophy around what the work week, the work day, how we incorporate technology into how we behave and exercise and communicate. So I think we got to pay more attention to that, because I don't think it's, hey, let's have an office to have an office.
Yeah.
I think let's be thoughtful about why we're doing certain things, because that'll end up saving us money, provide and solve the needs that our employees have, and help us get and weather through storms like we just had over the past 2 years, because more are coming and we need to be prepared for that and agile and help our employees, you know, adapt and change their behavior, because if we don't, another company will potentially gladly do that for us.
Even my own team pulled me up on it recently. We agreed that we'll come in every Monday, but then we was doing it for a few Mondays, but then we realized that there needs to be a reason why. It's not coming in for the sake of coming in. If we're coming in every Monday, why are we coming in? What's the purpose? What's the intention? And then we you know, if we're coming in just to sit on computers, then what's the point of even coming in? So we had to kind of build a completely new structure of how we come in, and it's a day of collaboration, you know, of exchanging ideas, of challenging what we're doing as well, but becoming more and more intentional, because those companies that are saying to employees, you need to come back 3 days a week. Why? Just because. And they're wondering why they're not. I saw the sort of meme you put on LinkedIn. I think a picture of the Kermit the Frog, or I think it was, if I remember correctly, and it was like,
Which is very off brand for me, by the way. That's my first meme of my whole career.
really,
And you know how much I posted over my like a lot,
that's a lot.
thousands.
Yeah. It's true, but it was very, it was what did it say again? What was the exact sentence?
When your employer wants you come into the office full time.
I had so many people that have had that same, they could relate to that, which is probably why it did so well. I saw another post you did as well when you were talking about how feeling heard drives a sense of purpose and belonging in the workplace. Could you share a bit more on that?
Sadly, a good percentage of the workforce is not heard or seen at work. And a lot of people who are minorities in the work are also not getting their voice heard. This is a study we did with UKG. A lot of the minority populations around the world are not getting heard, as well as essential workers are not getting heard. People who don't have children aren't getting heard. And when you compare generations, millennials and Gen Zs are not being heard as much as older workers. So it's this inequality that's happened, but it's also, if you think about what's going on in terms of hybrid and where people are working, it's this two-tiered system, right? It's a two-tiered system. People in the office, potentially closer to power, the executives who are making decisions, versus people who are at home. And then, knowledge workers versus hourly workers. Knowledge workers had the opportunity potentially to work remote, and about 74% of them at the height of COVID work remote at least sometimes, versus hourly workers that did not get that privilege, right? And were paid less. So there's two different realities. There's a lot of inequalities that are happening. And so when we think about moving forward with hybrid or remote work, is we have to think about how do we create the fairest system possible where people at least are in somewhat of the same playing ground. Otherwise, that's going to create a lot of negativity and hostility. The other thing that I'd like to touch on, Chris, is, we've had over a year to kind of redefine our lives and what success is. And one of the things that was really fascinating about the Oracle study was that, the majority, 93% of people used the past year to reflect on their lives. And 88% said the meaning of success has changed since the pandemic. So it is more of an emphasis, and I'm sure you're not surprised by this part, more of an emphasis on work-life balance, mental health, flexibility, because with great power, with great privilege of working from home comes great responsibility and also great problems and challenges of, how do you manage your work life, especially when your work life are in the same, room.
Yeah.
And I think, so the good thing, so I always look at what's the good and the bad, just like with technology, my last book, Back to Human, it's, the good thing with remote work and Zoom is that now I have a lens into your studio, for instance, or if I'm talking to someone else, I see their kid, I see their dog. I would not see, they don't have a bring your dog to work day every day if you work in an office. So I wouldn't be privy to that. I wouldn't know what your bedroom looks like per se, right? But now I get a different sense, a lens into who you are based on what I see in the remote work setting from your house. I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
But then, of course, the drawback is potentially more distracting. After, in the next year, of course, if you have your kid still doing that or your dog barking, it could be unprofessional. I think people got a pass during COVID because it was there was sensitivities and empathy towards people who were going and struggling. But also, I think it's difficult because you're more likely to take your problems with you at home. And we did find in this study that, people have really struggled this year. 80% of people have been negatively impacted by last year and are still struggling, and they're struggling in many ways, right? I mean, financially, it's not like, people are getting paid 2x what they were, right? And so, a lot of people got a pay cut and are still starting to rebound from that. But I think it's also a mental health thing, right? Because the thing we found last year, which was one of the standouts, is people traded their time that they used to spend commuting for more time working. And there's subsequent studies that I've seen that, amount of time spent working went up by upwards of 10%, and that's led to burnout. And what happens in the burnout cycle is once you're burned out, you actually become less productive and you're more likely to quit. So even if companies are all excited over the past year because with remote work that does increase productivity, if the mental health variable is not controlled or looked after, that can actually become counterproductive and cost the company a lot of money when it comes to attrition.
Yeah, because I was concerned about that. I remember early on in the pandemic, everyone was like, "Oh, productivity's through the roof," and in my head, I was thinking, "But at what cost?"
Yes.
Because I was doing the same thing. I was waking up, it was dark. I was working, and it was dark. I didn't even see daylight outside, and I started having anxiety attacks, and my mental health took a real downturn. And I said to my wife, I was like, "I need to restructure my life and just block out some times to get outside and just completely reassess what we're doing, because this is not going to work." And I saw the same thing happening within my employee population here as well, especially some of those people that live home alone who don't have any support system, who couldn't see family and friends, and they're on their own in their house as well. So you're right.
I do like to compare and contrast last year and this year. And as we did earlier was, in terms of the economy and, employees having the power this year versus employers last year. The other thing that really stood out about the Oracle study is that more than half of people struggle with mental health at work more this year than last year. So
Really?
even if you control and say, hey, the economy is so much better, easier to, get a job or a promotion or a bonus, still people are suffering because again they've underwent almost 2 years of suffering during COVID, where they're also interacting with people who aren't doing very well as well, and they're isolated. So it's all these things. It's this isolation combined with burnout, combined with hearing on the news like the death count, the COVID count, like it's all this stuff combined that can drag people down. Yeah, and the other thing that I thought was really interesting about the study, Chris, is we're relying way more on technology than we ever did. I mean, like we rely on Uber and Lyft, to get us places. We rely on, Alexa and Siri to like tell us what the weather is, right? Like our behavior has really switched in our personal lives. And that's one of the things we found year over year is that how we behave in our personal lives, the technology we use, we want the same in the workplace. And this is more apparent now since our workplace and our home are one and the same for these knowledge workers. So one of the big findings was 85% of people want technology to help define their future. And again, it's leaning on technology more for mental health, leaning on technology more for career development. It's overall the big theme over the years that we've discovered is this: people leaning more on technology to solve problems and to help them define themselves, their future, get help in new ways. And I think that that's kind of the crux of where is this all going? It's more technology, more use cases with technology, understanding the relationship and role of technology versus human support, and bringing everything together so we can have a fully functioning workplace and strong corporate culture.
Mm-hmm. What was the biggest surprise for you in the research?
That was a little bit less of a surprise and more just a lot of things confirm what I already know because I'm so deep in the space. So these are always the hardest questions for me.
Yeah, you're like, well, I saw that coming.
Yeah, this is study number 60 for me.
All right.
That I've led in 9 years, and like secondary research and all this and all of my interviews. So I just think overall, I think the fact that people feel stuck even in a good economy just reiterates that making choices is hard, and especially if you've suffered so much, like there's a lot to consider. And I think that a career coach or advisor, or mentor, or manager can be helpful. But again, I think it's this combination of, okay, let me get their opinion, but let me also do my own research and also pull in data from technology to see, what I need to know, what skills I need to develop. And how I think of things, it's really this combination of both. And the survey kind of reiterates, hey, let's use all of our resources, human or machine, in order to solve these problems and make better decisions. Because clearly, if you're a leader, if you're a professional in society, the biggest challenge that I've even said this like in the beginning of my career, to be honest, like when I was talking about personal branding and when I was 22, 23 years old, biggest challenge of people today is staying relevant in a world that's constantly changing. And in order to do that, you got to pool information from as many sources as you can to make the best decision possible.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. Well, look, keep it coming. I'm loving it. And even before our first ever podcast together, I was always a big fan of your work, and you've kind of, you're not stopping anytime soon as well. So it's big inspiration for me and the team, and I love the work you're doing. For everyone listening, where can they, if they want to see the research, where can they kind of check it out? And also, how can they connect with you and follow all the work that you do?
You can find it on oracle.com's newsroom. You can find a lot. We're going to be, in our LinkedIn newsletter, Workplace Intelligence LinkedIn newsletter. You're going to be able to find, a lot of this content and the findings as well as our Workplace Intelligence Insider.com. So that's the more detailed, information about the study as well. So there's going to be a lot of this out there, as you know. And again, this is part of this bigger puzzle of, how do we figure out what the future is, the roles of technology and humans as we move in so that we can make better data defined, decisions. And as you also know, I have a podcast called 5 Questions, and that's me interviewing people to really understand career paths and decisions around that. So again, qualitative and quantitative, many sources, and relying on each other to solve decisions because, hey, things are getting more complicated, not less. The world is changing, and we need to adapt and make decisions based on what's available to the best of our ability. And if we make a mistake, we admit to it, but we have to keep on moving forward.
And for everyone listening, we're releasing this episode on the day of the release of the research. So the link is already below. So if you click the link in the description below, all of the links that Dan mentioned are already there. Also, I'd highly recommend you follow Dan on LinkedIn as well. We post some incredible content there. Definitely subscribe to the newsletter, amazing insights, but everything will be linked below as always to make things easier. But it was a pleasure again chatting with you. Maybe we shouldn't leave it a year again until we speak as well, but keep up the amazing work and I look forward to doing it again soon.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you so much for having me on.